Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I am your host, Solaris BlueRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Will Champion. We're discussing his latest book, The Dreamland Files. And Will, before we talk about the Vril Society, looks like Olive from the chat has a quick question here. If you want to answer it, it's ask the guest, what do cemeteries have to do with 1947 Roswell and Area 51, if at all? I suspect.
Cemeteries.
Yeah.
I don't quite get the connection. Sorry.
I don't either. Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. You can elaborate, Olive, in the chat, but I don't think anything has a correlation. That's just me, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
all right. Unless he knows something we don't. That's okay. So let's dive into the Vril.
Okay. I would venture a guess and say that you, Solaris, probably are really familiar with this particular story. So I'm probably preaching to the choir here, or singing to the choir rather. But am I right?
Well,
pretty
yeah,
well versed.
I don't think all the listeners really have heard it. So
that's right. So for their benefit, I'll kind of go into it a little bit here. And I think maybe for those who really haven't gotten a hold of this information, I'll just try to get the basics covered, and then we'll go on into something else that I believe you will all find rather profound in nature. I'll tie it all together. How'll that be?
Excellent.
Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Well, this Vril Society was formed by a group of 5 very beautiful and charming female psychic mediums, and they were led by the Thule Society medium by the name of Maria Orsic. Now, according to what I've been able to find in research, she may have had a last name that was spelled differently. It depends on which source you consult or what sources you consult. For simplicity, I will just say her name was Maria Orsic. Mm-hmm. And it seems that Maria and the other gals in this group these were incredible women. And they were at their peak in 1920s and 1930s Germany, which at the time was obviously in a lot of turmoil. Mm-hmm. And it seems that Maria had been getting a lot of messages in some sort of an unknown language, and she couldn't understand the language, nor could she transcribe the language these messages were coming to her in. And so she began networking with other key members of the Thule societies, upper echelon, as it were, and they were all strikingly beautiful women, and each had very, very long hair, unfashionably long at the time. And it's my understanding that they believed their long hair to be antennas, and it greatly enhanced their abilities as psychic mediums. Well, apparently Maria became close with another medium by the name of Sigrun. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Sigrun. And the two formed their own group. They split off from the Thule Society, and they called their group the Vril Society. V-R-I-L is the spelling. And this society combined the political ideals of the Order of the Illuminati with the mysticisms of the Hindus and the Persians and Sumerians, even the Assyrians, and to a lesser extent, really, Christian mystics. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, they purportedly were receiving communications from Aryan aliens, living on Alpha Centauri in the Aldebaran system. Now, if one accepts this, allegedly, these aliens had visited Earth and settled in the area of ancient Sumeria. And the word viril was formed from the ancient Sumerian word vril. I believe that means like God or godlike. So we're talking about some rather powerful stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, according to this history, the Aryan aliens living on the Alpha Centauri in the Aldebaran system are the ancestors of the white people today on Earth. So it seems that Maria and the others were given information from these alien beings about a divine force they call viril energy. And this could probably best be described as an ether stream of sorts that could be transformed into a physical force, which, if wielded, makes you look similar to a god. Now think on that for a minute. If you can master this energy and use it, that's
Right.
pretty powerful stuff. And it will relate to something even more profound in a few minutes. Now, one day, apparently, Maria suddenly went into a trance state and she caught telepathic information in a language that was completely foreign to her. And she later wrote many texts in these two mysterious languages. Well, apparently these were from the Aldebaran godmen, or an Aryan godman, a particular one from Aldebaran, rather. Now, after a time, she and the other real women collaborated with another secret society that recognized these strange writings. And get ready. It turns out that this transmitted information contained very precise technical details to build a flying disc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the Thule Society, these women originally were members of, financed the construction of a prototype in 1922, and it was tested, I believe, for a couple of years, and then torn apart and dismantled and stored in the workshops of a very famous airplane manufacturer, German manufacturer called Messerschmitt. And they manufactured many of the very famous high-speed fighter planes the Nazi used during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this original craft was presented to Hitler or his representatives in, I believe it was 1934, and a second disc-shaped flying machine was built utilizing an electromagnetic anti-gravity propulsion system that purportedly ran on this viril energy, this mysterious energy, etheric energy. Now, these crafts continued to. Yes.
I'm not going to interrupt you, but I just have to ask, when you say it sounds like 0-point energy is what you're describing.
I think it's probably been discovered and developed and utilized by a whole bunch of people over time, and it's been given various names, and I would not be surprised if it's all one and the same thing.
Didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had to interject that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. It's an excellent point. And Nikola Tesla probably experimented with it and came up with some of the most profoundly significant science in all of human history. And I strongly suspect it's one and the same stuff we're talking about. Yep, 0 point, whatever you want to call it. I think it's the same stuff. Well, it all depends on an anti-gravity drive system, probably electromagnetic by nature, and a whole bunch of these crafts were constructed. And depending on which and whose resources you pay attention to, my understanding is these crafts were all piloted by the Vril women. Now, what a bunch.
Very interesting.
And apparently, an entire generation of these Vril crafts were created and they were armed and they were probably set to be used in combat. And an offshoot, a different series of the Vril spacecraft were constructed, and they were denoted or known as the Hanabu spacecrafts. And there was the Hanabu Series 1s and 2s and 3s and so on, but really none of them were quite suitable for aerial combat. Oh, they tried, but when they were armed with conventional weaponry like machine gun turrets and so on, it didn't do much good because the electromagnetic drive probably interfered with the bullets being fired and they just went everywhere. So they scrapped that idea. And eventually, at least one series of the Hanabu craft developed by the Vril women, which was about 75 feet in diameter, as I recall. It could fly, it could levitate, held a crew of about 8, and its speed was tremendous. And they had actual laser cannons, probably something called a KSK, I believe. And these things were so powerful, Solaris, they could penetrate up to 4-inch thick armor plating. Pretty substantial firepower there, and they actually had the ability to fly in space. And eventually, in 1944, American intelligence operatives managed to photograph one of these things taking off from Prague. And this model was being tested by the first time by Sigrun. And pretty much this is where the hard evidence that we now have historical records of came into being, and that's through American intelligence photographs. Now, in March of 1945, Vril number 7 and Vril 8 spacecrafts took off from Brandenburg there in Germany, and the whole field had pretty much been blown up and obliterated by Allied bombing. And the Vril women were aboard the craft. They took off. And shortly thereafter, one of these crafts returned, and it was beat up and battered. The skin was scorched, and apparently the findings were this thing had traveled the equivalent of centuries through space and time. At any rate, the next time the crafts took off and were flown with Maria Orsic and the other Vril women aboard, that was the last time they were ever seen. None of the other original crafts, Vril crafts, were ever seen again. Nothing was ever found of them, and Maria Orsic was never found again. It's as if they just totally disappeared from the face of the earth. And it's been speculated, there's no doubt, that their intended destination was Aldebaran.
Hmm. And how do you think they piloted this craft? Do you think it was something with a symbiotic exchange or with their abilities through their state of consciousness? Do you have any idea how that worked when they were testing these crafts?
I think if I were to go into that, it would be conjecture
Hmm.
on my part. I kind of tend to shy away from things that I can't prove.
That's okay. That's
Uh,
fine. I just had to
but
ask.
my best guess would be there were probably some sort of physical control mechanisms by which one could pilot and guide the craft and direct these crafts
Hmm.
where pretty much wherever they wanted to go. And that would include an array of instruments that could also operate the craft's firepower.
Hmm.
Um, Apparently, Hitler and Himmler and the boys didn't intend these things to be used for pleasure. These were to be developed for aerial weapons of war. They were warcraft.
Hmm.
Now, what happened to them, what became of those particular craft, it's anybody's guess, but according to the documentation, they vanished without a trace and have never been seen again. Which brings us to the conclusion of World War II. And if you or your listeners are up on the rather sordid history of World War II itself, we all pretty much know that the Nazis didn't just go out of style, they survived to the end.
Hmm.
It's pretty much a certainty that because of American intelligence operation known as Paperclip, most of the top Nazi rocket scientists and physicists were smuggled out of Germany, given immunity, alternative identities, and were put to work here in the United States to develop our space and super weapons programs. Werner von Braun was one of them. He
Hmm.
had developed the V 2 missile, and numerous other Nazi rocket scientists were also brought to the U.S., and they were all working for the CIA. Um, so, and Hitler probably lived a long and happy life down in South America, probably Argentina. Um, Operation High Jump soon followed in the year 1947, interestingly enough.
Hmm.
And High Jump was known because um, a U.S. Navy expedition down to Antarctica was formed and launched under the command of Admiral Byrd, who, and this is just mind boggling to me too, he had at his disposal about, I don't know, 6,000 men or so, a warship, an aircraft carrier fully equipped, and a whole system full of supplies sufficient to last a while, to say the very least. And this was all to Antarctica, and under Paperclip and also under Hitler's direction, a number of the original unused Vril and Hannibal spacecrafts were dismantled and taken to Antarctica. And naval bases were set up there, German naval bases. Um, Byrd's fleet ran into terrible losses for some reason. And apparently, the expedition was cut short. And what we believe has happened, according to research, is several biological entity races of beings, including a variety of very large and very ill tempered reptilians, were down there, and that's what Admiral Byrd and his expedition encountered.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Which might partially explain what all the buzz about Antarctica today of recent note might be all about. I guess it's no secret now, the word's out. A whole slew of scientists and military people and world leaders, including notably John Kerry and U.S. NASA astronaut Buzz Aldrin, have been down there. And apparently he was shaken and became violently ill and became behaving uncharacteristically and returned home with a very verbal warning to go to Mars immediately.
Hmm.
I still don't quite know what to make of that, but apparently, whatever the buzz is down there in Antarctica, it was sufficient or is sufficient to draw a lot of attention. And now military forces have gathered and they've declared Antarctica off limits to the rest of the world. It's a no-fly zone, and whatever it is they're seeing and investigating down there is something so big and profound. They certainly don't want the rest of us to know what it is.
Sounds like they're trying to
And
control it.
oh yeah, absolutely. That's their game. Big
Mm-hmm.
on control.
Yeah.
So pretty much, again, if all these pieces of the picture puzzle are coming into a certain degree of light and clarity, again, we are a race of human alien hybrids. And maybe some of our ancestors have turned up there. There's a lot of information on the internet that's being brought forward by a number of credible sources, reputable and credible sources, that say a race of flash frozen giant humanoids, the remains of them have been discovered there. The fact is, we simply don't have enough knowledge or information yet to know exactly what is going on down there. But whatever it is big. I'm sure of that.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to go over there, and I think as you were saying, it's impossible really to visit the site and the location unless you get some kind of a clearance. What's really interesting is to me, I've always considered Antarctica to be an anti-gravity jump point. In other words, I think it's easier to traverse the cosmos from that area. It's just a different, in my opinion, it's 0 point over there. There's more anti-gravity. So that's just me, but that's my intuitive hit on it. So I'd like to go check it out. I just, I've always been drawn to it, but fascinating data. Any way you look at it, yeah, something's up. We all know they're liars, so we have to peel away all these layers and start looking with multidimensional sight.
I'll go with you.
All right. Yeah. Let me know if you do. I swear I can, let's just get over there. You know what's funny, Will? I've always said this, if I get over there, I know what to look for and I know how to deal with it. And this is what's a shame and a disservice, because those of us who are what I consider to be very maybe advanced without any arrogance, we're just wired differently. We're not part of this structure. We can actually decode things so much better. And it's a disservice because we could actually get in there and assist and do things. Maybe that's what it is. They just don't want us to, because we could make things better for everybody. But I just get that vibe. We have a bunch of questions in here. I don't know if you want to answer any of these or not, but I was trying to keep up with this. But
would you indulge me for a few more minutes?
Sure, I will,
and
then
I'll do my best to try and field a few questions
Okay.
within my ability.
That's perfect.
You touched upon something that I think is extremely relevant, and I'm sure it is. Now, let's go back to that energy that you mentioned. Yeah, you referred to it as 0 point. Heck, Einstein even referred to this mysterious energy as, quote, spooky action at a distance. Now, is that Einstein or what?
Mhm. Very interesting. Yeah.
Simply put, I like to think about this idea this way. Everything in the universe that we occupy is interconnected with everything else. Now, let me expand on that a little bit. Now, with that spooky action at a distance thing in mind, recent research has taken something called quantum entanglement out of the realm of theoretical physics and placed it literally into the category of verified phenomena. And, this is where I like to go because I like to take these fascinating concepts that are concepts until we attach them and until they're verifiable and can attach some degree of validity to them in a scientific sense. Now, get this. I'm glad you're probably sitting down, right?
Uh-huh.
Ah,
Should I be?
good. Yep, good. This is where we start getting really interesting. You'll see and bear with me, I'm going someplace with this, okay?
Okay.
Now, an experiment devised recently by I think it's Griffiths University Center, and I hope I'm recalling this correctly, for quantum dynamics. Boy, there's a title for you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It was led by a professor and his team of researchers, and this was at the University of Tokyo, this team. And they recently published an actual paper in the journal entitled Nature Communications. And it confirms what Einstein didn't believe to be real, and that is that the non-local collapse of a particle's wave function exists. So if we look at these energies, we now believe that they're not so much particles as they are waves or wave functions. Now, that was kind of a difficult thing for me to wrap my brain around, my mind around at first, and I really don't know how they did this. Solaris, I do not know, but I will just tell you the nuts and bolts of what I've been able to determine. These professors, physicists, actually were able to split a single photon. I don't know how, but they split that single photon between two laboratories to test and measure it in one laboratory to see if it would actually cause a change in the local quantum state in the other laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a telegram or so. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
exactly
Yeah,
how
so
I
like
would
a resonance
describe it.
effect.
Yeah. And so they were actually able to verify the entanglement of the split single photon. And they've since replicated this experiment over and over and over again with the same results, that entanglement is seen at a distance, kilometers distant. And they concluded that space is just the construct that gives the illusion that they're separate objects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we know, we see with our senses, or we can hold an object in our hands, a physical object, and we say, oh, okay, here's an object here, and here's an object in the other hand, and they're two separate things, and this is, according to the results of this experiment, they are one and the same.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
It's
They're vibrating at
it's
different frequencies.
Yep. And so that which we thought to be solid objects may not be that way at all, in fact. In other words, what happens in what we call a reality is actually affecting something else within that same reality. It's all somehow touching. And what's happening here is that um, whether we're witnessing the transfer of that information at a vibrational speed far greater than the speed of light, or even better, something completely instantaneous is happening. And, I'm going to break for just a second and just put forward a question. And would that not make baloney of the concept we've always had in recent times that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light as we know it?
Correct. Absolutely. It's all been a
What
lie.
about the speed of thought? Wouldn't that explain what happens in the phenomenon, for example, between two identical twins separated perhaps at opposite sides of the earth? Something happens to one twin, and instantaneously the other twin knows about it.
Right. That's because there's no time or distance. It's consciousness oriented and it's frequency based.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we know the mechanics behind this because it's really because I think we're celestial beings. We just have a database of knowledge.
True. I completely agree. And I'm going to carry this a step farther to a conclusion that I think you will find extremely juicy. Let's go into it. Now,
Yay.
When I was doing that stuff and going out to the Area 51, I ran into a bunch of characters that were, these guys were tremendous, and I had no idea the extent of the knowledge base they had. But I was told that there was let's face it, a division of something called Lockheed Martin, and that's one of the world's biggest defense contractors, known as Skunk Works. And let me back my truck up just a little bit and tell you and your listeners that we, and this saddens me to say, but we as a nation have lost our sovereignty. And I know this because of my legal excursions, my research, my legal battlefield tactics. I know this is true. In fact, we no longer have a voice as a people. Right. That's been taken from us. The voice is now the giant mega banks and giant mega corporations. That's the only voice our public officials listen to. And they're all bought and paid for by these giant rich entities. Now, given that, a lot of people are sitting around wringing their hands and they're on pins and needles waiting, salivating, waiting for official government disclosure that extraterrestrials and spacecrafts from other worlds actually exist. Well, let me tell you, given that the role of governing the masses has been handed over without our knowledge or consent as a people to the giant banks and corporations that comprise, well, let's just call it the military industrial complex. That's one segment of this population that now calls the shot in our country. They are the government. Let me make that clear. Until we, the people, find a way to get our government wrested back from these entities and back under our control, they are the government. It's a sad fact, but a true fact. Now, getting back to Area 51 and this Lockheed Martin and this Skunk Works I'd been hearing about, there was a fellow I learned later, and it's all now documented, well documented. There's plenty of information on it now. Of course, now it's out there. I had to really dig down deep into the matrix to get at what these guys were telling me about. But this Skunk Works division of Lockheed Martin was really working overtime out at Area 51, or if you will, Dreamland. And they were developing crafts like the F-117A Nighthawk, the stealth fighter, stealth technologies, all kinds of really cool things going on out there. And Skunk Works was developing it. And the director of Skunk Works was a gentleman by the name of Ben Rich. And most of us never heard of Ben Rich, but believe you me, you all will want to remember his name. Ben Rich was this division's director from, I believe it was 1975 to the early 90s, maybe 90 or 91. And in his later years, his health began to fail. And I guess he must have had an awful lot of stuff on his conscience and on his chest and in his heart that he wanted to get rid of. And so he actually went on the public record as the director of Lockheed Martin, and being Lockheed Martin, that is part of this de facto government that now runs the show. Ben Rich was quoted in a number of television and radio interviews, and it's on the public record. We can find his quotes. And here we go. Get ready. Ben Rich is quoted as saying, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black budget projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity." That's a pretty profound statement.
Yeah, it's confessing the truth.
Now, he goes on to say that, hey, anything you can imagine, we already know how to do it. We now have technology to take ET home. And no, it won't take somebody's lifetime to do it. There was an error in Einstein's equations, and we know what it was, and we fixed it, and we now have the ability to travel to the stars. We have things out there that are literally out of this world, better than Star Trek or what you see in the movies. And this is the bottom line.
Yep.
This is the golden nugget right here. He said, there are two types of UFOs, the ones we build and the unfunded ones they build. Emphasis on the word unfunded. Now
Correct.
Take a moment and think on that.
Right.
Now, Ben Rich was asked how the UFO propulsion systems worked. And he says, well, now let me ask you, how does ESP work? And the interviewer, questioner, answered back, well, all points in time and space are connected, right? And Ben Rich said, yep, essentially. And that's exactly how it works. Now, that's an interesting notion to think about, isn't it? And so maybe the vast distances that exist between planets and solar systems and so on, well, it really isn't as much of a barrier as we've been told as is.
Not, and that's the whole idea. It's consciousness in motion. It's if we, when you're mastering consciousness, we can navigate through frequency. We can phase shift and bilocate. We don't even need a ship. I mean, that's the real science behind it.
And it all goes back to what we refer to as quantum physics. Yep. And according to this particular discipline now that's being referred to as quantum entanglement, i.e. everything is interconnected with everything else in the known universe which we occupy. Well, now it all makes sense. And right there, is a statement from the government, an official disclosure from the government, a giant mega defense contractor corporation that literally comprises the government in our world, our country today.
Mm-hmm.
That is official government disclosure.
Right.
Official? You bet. The Supreme Court has recently ruled that a corporation in a legal term, in a legal sense, is a person. A person considered now, or persons, to be government, i.e., corporations have now been handed the role of governing the masses until we take that back, until we
Mm-hmm.
wake up, put down the Kool-Aid, get off our couches, and march to Washington and every state capital and take our government back from these corporate entities. Whew.
Mm-hmm.
How
Well,
about that for disclosure?
well, the funny thing is, by universal law, we have free will to be honored. So anybody who's obfuscating the truth here, anybody who's trying to control and manipulate us, or limit our evolution, or hide the truth, which is really our celestial heritage, that's against universal codes and violation of universal law. So that goes way beyond man's law, man's version of law. So I do see a lot of things happening, and a lot of things are shattering right now. It's fascinating information, and I think you're right. Just get in there and start changing it all now, not yesterday. I can't live the lie anymore. I don't want to live in this false matrix anymore. I don't think anybody else does, Will. We're tired of this deception. Everybody's sick of it, as you probably can tell.
Yep,
So,
me too.
yeah,
Uh, hence the Dreamland Files.
right,
I
exactly.
I I can tell you, when I was doing that law thing, that literally became my crucible. Crucible. That's where I learned to take exception. I didn't want to buy into the lies and the control systems anymore. I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong, and nobody was telling me about it. Well, I just gave you and your listeners a dose of reality and truth that I learned and discovered and put to the test the hard way at great personal risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you a clue. I'll give you and your listeners a clue, a very profound clue to the truth of which I speak. And it's every day, it's hidden in plain sight, and we have no idea what it is. Nobody told me what it was. Nobody explained it to me. I learned it the hard way, and now I'm going to pass this little gold nugget on to you guys. Bear with me because it's entirely relevant to everything we're discussing. Do you know what it means when you see our American flag, Old Glory, and you see that flag displayed and it is surrounded at its borders with golden ropes or tassels or fringe, or displayed on a very ornate standard, a pole in other words, and there may be golden ropes and tassels hanging down from it? Do you know what that means?
Isn't it maritime or admiral law or something like that? Which one is it? It's one or the other.
Bingo! You've been
Okay.
doing your homework.
Okay, which one is it though? I know it. Admiral, right?
It is British Admiralty law and
Okay.
jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, which
It's
means
foreign law. It means it's foreign law that's being enforced, and it is Admiralty law that's being enforced on our home soil, but it's the law of the pirate on the high seas.
hmm
And, you got to stop and ask yourself, what is Admiralty law of the sea doing, being practiced and enforced in our courts and enforced by our police and military, who oftentimes have no clue whose law, what law they're supposed to be enforcing because nobody tells them either.
hmm
It's foreign law. It's not even our law. In fact, a number of British corporations that publish the laws and the case laws, the little poopy law students going through law school get to study in the law books. It's all published by a number of British corporations like West's Publishing or Barclays. It's not even our law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting,
And
isn't it?
if you look in your yellow pages, if you can find a phone book anymore, and look through attorneys section A under attorneys, and go down the list, and you'll find lawyers, attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
and they list themselves as esquires. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what's an esquire? An esquire is a title of British nobility. It ranks just below knight in the hierarchy and just above squire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, originally, our original Constitution for the United States of America forbade uh, titles of nobility in this country. Now, you can't be granted a title of nobility in this country, but after 1812, which I won't go into, a significant year, now people with the title of British nobility can have that title and even practice law with it. So, what's that mean? We're tied to the British crown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that needs to sever. That needs to go away.
It
There's no reason
does.
for it. I mean, this is what
Yeah.
I mean by a whole shakedown, and the courtrooms are illegal, in my opinion, anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a point in the chat that said admiralty law or uniform commercial code question.
Uniform Commercial Code. And there's another big clue. What does the word code imply? That secret information is being provided from someone to someone, and it's encrypted, and you have to decode that encryption in order to understand it. And using words of art, we used to have laws in our country, actual laws. Well, now they're codes. They're actually entitled codes. And the codes written by giant corporations and their battalions of lawyers, heck, our legislators don't even write the laws anymore. They're just
Mm-hmm.
paid to pass them. Well, those
Right.
codified things that are being passed off as laws have to be interpreted, and they're written in a language called words of art that can be interpreted to mean anything at any given time, so long as it's to the advantage of Big Brother and Big Brother's system to
Mm-hmm.
maintain the status quo. That's why you won't get justice in your country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the system is so heinous
It is.
and
Yeah.
needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
But I give that to my readers in the Dreamland Files. So maybe you don't have a clue about law or procedure going in. You'll have a good, thorough working knowledge when you come to the end.
Right. Well, I think the whole idea is to tear down the system and reconstruct it the way it should be. And I would say there's so many false matrices here. I think it's imploding. I really do. But what's really concerning is that people go into these courtrooms and it's all a persona. It's all a facade. And
It
it's
is.
just, it's not. We've got to get away from these things. We cannot be pulled into these gravity wells that are designed to basically control, manipulate, and well, in my opinion, enslave us when they're not even. It's laws out of lawlessness. So yeah, how do you fight such a
Mhm.
thing? I mean, honestly, it's how do you fight those things, Will? I mean, obviously you walked away from that sort of thing, and I don't blame you,
Mhm.
quite honestly, because after a while it's ridiculous.
Well, you asked the question. I will try to answer it in a way that makes sense.
Mhm.
In law, and you just nailed it. It's all a fictitious system, as it is typically practiced today. It's all based on lies and fiction and fraud. Well, in law, a lie cannot communicate with the truth. It can only communicate with other lies. And at the end of the day, the lie cannot stand in the light of truth. And that's where you get them.
Mhm.
That's where you fight them. You don't fight them with substantive laws and get into an argument in court. You will lose.
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers are trained to do that lawyering stuff and debate and wear you down and divert you away from pertinent matters by taking you down rabbit holes to argue and argue and argue while they just win.
Mm-hmm.
But if you attack them in truth by their failures, and it's always a procedural failure, they cannot win. The truth will prevail, and that's where you get them. That's how you beat Big Brother. You take them on in their own backyard, and you drive a wooden stake through their black, crusty little hearts, and you walk away.
Nice. I like it. Very well said, Will. I must say, and I encourage everybody to please purchase your book. And I know we sold one already, so
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
listeners are loving it. And once again,
Congratulations to the winner.
telling you, and once again, let everybody know how to reach out to you if they want to connect with you in some way. Are you available
Yes,
on Facebook?
absolutely.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, yes, you can connect with me on Facebook or Twitter. I'm on Twitter. And if one goes to my website, www.willchampion.com, there's a series of interactive buttons at the top of the home page, just below the header. And one is a contact button, and that should connect me straight up to, that would connect you up to my email. So you can connect me with me there as well.
Wonderful.
But I would ask one thing from your listeners. If you'd like to download the book, please do so. I thank you in advance, but please take a moment before you click the Buy Now button with PayPal and read the download instructions. It's very important because if you don't read them and follow them exactly, it won't download the book to your device, and it's not formatted to go on all devices. But if you want to read the book, buy the book and read it, I can send you a copy of the book that is more or less universal that you can read on almost any device, and I'll be happy to do that. Just let me know.
Excellent.
However, in conclusion, I don't know if you got time for me to field a quick question from
Yeah.
somebody or two.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But
I do, and there's like a bunch of them over here. Let me look here.
I'll
Let
take
me
a
see if I can
crack
find a
at
good
it.
one. All right, ask Will what the Aldebaran's name was. Do you know that offhand?
I think it was just Aldebaran. I don't know a specific name. If you're asking for a particular name of this Aldebaran God man or man God, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows at this point. At least I was not able to determine that by the research that I performed. And regrettably, I do not know.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's no, well done. And there's another one here. Ask about the Deglocker, if he knows about Deglocker at all.
Not familiar with that one.
Okay.
I'm for some reason I'm getting a little alarm bell that goes off about. I wonder if that's part of the Bell project as we know about it, an
Oh, that sounds like
anti-gravity.
it. That
I
would be
wonder.
JP. Yeah, no, I think you might be on that same passage. If you want to elaborate,
Yeah.
JP, text me, but we're running out of time here. And there was one more from Olive here. Can you ask about Operation Freeze with Admiral Byrd?
Yeah, apparently Admiral Byrd got caught up in a whole bunch of things, including allegedly discovering a gigantic hole in the polar regions that could possibly lead to a hollow Earth or an inner Earth. And apparently, from my understanding and my recollection, other beings, races of controllers that may be subterranean Their habitat might be subterranean. Goes on and on and on. It's all interconnected and quite fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And that was Die Glock, by the way. It was the bell,
The
I believe.
bell, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I
the
thought.
Nazi bell. You were right.
My apologies. Yeah,
That's
similar
okay.
technologies based on anti-gravity technologies. I guess the hope was to develop a flying craft that could go into space using those technologies.
And I'm
Very
sure that
interesting system.
it is, and I'm sure by now they've mastered quite a bit. But as you were touching on, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We're just about out of time. Will, it's been an honor to interview you tonight. I want to thank you very much for being on with us. It's been incredible. It really
Oh,
has.
my pleasure, Solaris.
Yeah.
Truly, I'm honored myself, and I'm so glad to have appeared on your show. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and oh, what can I say? But thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
My pleasure. And with that being said, we're out of time here. And thank you, Will. And thanks, everybody, for the great questions in chat and donations. And stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mickey coming up to sell you on tonight from Down Under, as they always do with their wonderful show. Their topic tonight is going to be the quantum mind. So stay tuned, everybody. And thank you again, Will. And thank you, everybody. Have a great week.